Yes, sir. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are tuning in. And welcome to another episode of Working It Out Across Generations, where a mother and son duo who work in conflict resolution are just trying to have some real conversations and offer some real life tools and tips for dealing with our everyday conflicts that shape the tomorrow that we all live. And I am Justin.
And I am Dr. Lynne. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you for tuning in. Yes, we are links in the chain. We are so connected. And, today's topic is, as always, I think every topic we do is really important because it touches lives. Today's topic is, are you experiencing internal conflict? Some people call it inner conflict. And I really like talking about this. I like the fact that we're talking about this because I've been writing a blog for I think the past 7-8 years. And whenever I write something about internal or inner conflict, that's when I get the most feedback from folks. That's when they want to email me or direct message or even text me if they know me and say, wow, this is something that I am struggling with. So today I am really happy that we're bringing this to you. And if we're talking to you, stay tuned, right? Because I think we have something good and important and useful for you today. So I'm gonna go right into it. Cool.
Please do.
All right. So for me, right, I've noticed that a lot of people are in their heads. I think it's gotten worse since COVID when people had to shelter in and didn't see other people a lot, and some people were alone. Others had family members or friends. People got together, but most of us really did not get a chance to socialize. And yes, you're on social media, which to me creates a lot of reasons why people are in their head, because you have social media serves a good purpose, but then you also have people's different opinions that are being interjected into your world and into your thoughts. And a lot of us are frankly beating ourselves up in our heads because of what other people think, or because we don't have anybody to run things by, or not enough good advice out there, or we just don't want to get advice from somebody else. We just want to do it our way and listen to ourselves. But I'm going to tell you, as mean as it can get on social media, I've found the meanest voice is our own.
Mm-hmm.
It just is.
Absolutely.
We say things to ourselves that we would never ever say to somebody else. And so when you have inner conflict, it could be thoughts about yourself. It could be a decision that you have to make, right? And you're conflicted about it. It could be with regard to someone else, but you're conflicted about maybe a conversation that you had. I'm going to tell you, I had a conversation last night, and I was like, yeah, okay. When I woke up this morning, I was like, wow, you're going to have to go back to that person, right? And deal with it. But in my head and all night, I was going back and forth, right, with it, because I was conflicted. As much as I started out in the conversation thinking I'm right, I realized that there was a lot of conflict within me going on. And I know I can remember one blog in particular where I said, I'm going through something. I'm going to tell you, I posted it. I sent the blog out to my mailing list. I posted it on Facebook. People that I hardly ever see on Facebook, or certainly never comment on my stuff, I mean, I got about 80 comments from people, and then texts and direct messages like, oh, I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because you're talking to me, because I've been going through some stuff. When you talk about people being depressed, right? That's inner conflict. It really is. When I was in therapy, my therapist told me that depression is anger turned inward, right? And so
Mm.
really just thinking about that kind of conflict that a lot of people are experiencing, we need help with the inner conflicts. That's what I think. So what about you, Justin?
Yeah, I think for me personally, when it comes to this topic, you'll often hear me talk about starting with you, right?
Mhm.
And even within our description, you'll see that that's something that we made sure that we said, right? That we
Right.
made sure that we put in there, because the reality is the outside world is the outside world. We can expect conflict, we can expect ugliness, we can expect all of these things, and especially just at base rate challenging of our lens, challenging of our beliefs, right?
Right.
And even that alone can be life shifting for people, right? And so when we talk about, and this does go into my generational take, but when we talk about simply opening the space up for asking these questions on this level,
Mhm.
right? I think that um, generationally speaking, my generation, as well as I can even call millennials into this piece of it, I think that we've done a great job of at least starting to ask those questions,
Right.
right? Because the reality is, mother, son, father, daughter, brother, sister, right? Friend, partner, all of these things, right? These are roles that we play, right? The reality is that we're still a heart, we're still a soul, we're still a mind, we're still a conscious before anything else.
Mhm.
And so it is very much true that when the mind, body, and soul are connected, or as much as possible, you really do get to step in life with a different kind of strength, a different kind of trust, faith, if you would even go into that depth of
Mhm.
what that really looks like for you, if that's the best way to describe it. And I think that that can't happen if we're not able to say we're people first, and we need to talk about what's coming up for me, for this environment, for this community, from a people perspective first, right? We love talking about profiting off of things. We love talking about, just making a lot of things into money or opportunity of something that we can get like a guaranteed ROI on, right?
Right. Right.
Whereas I think that, there's a lot of things here that can't be measured by quotas, that can't be measured by quarterly evaluations, right? This is lifelong work. It's a lifelong journey of understanding who you are, at whatever point of life that you're in. And I think that asking these questions, posing that question, and putting these statements out there, and saying that it's safe to do so,
Mhm.
especially I've seen that in the workplace, which is beautiful, right?
Right.
I think that only gets you the profit and ROI that you're looking for, but also a lot more of the stuff that you maybe weren't looking for that is all the more valuable as well.
Yeah. So have you experienced inner conflict yourself?
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anxiety is inner conflict.
That's right.
Depression is inner conflict.
Mhm.
I definitely struggle with some of that stuff, right? And I think that me personally, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, but I have a lot of like nervous energy that I like
Right.
need to do something with,
Right.
right? And so if I can't, right, then it gets a little harder to snap back into just what this is, who I am, where
Right.
where I am, and how I got there, right? But every single day, and I think that I was very fortunate and blessed to grow up also in a household that encouraged these types of questions and
Mhm.
encouraged these types of conversations, right? I know that that's not everyone,
Right.
and I really wish that it was, considering that we don't have to like everything that everyone says. We don't have to like or have these things land the way that people would expect it. But I think just having that space, having the conversation, being able to say, wow, I've never thought about it like that, right? And doing that in a manner that's healthy and productive, right? I think is just everything when it
Right.
comes to getting close to whatever answer you possibly could, right? These things fluctuate, we grow. all the time, every single day, right? We're changing, we're evolving, we're growing. But at the end of the day, to know where you are when you're there as best as possible, I think is the best way to go.
Thank you for that. But one of the things that it brought up to mind is I've been doing the work of conflict resolution for over 40 years. And one of the things that I used to start out with and teach is that, how many people think conflict is bad? And ask people raise their hands, how many people think it's good? How many think it's neither? And, and I would say conflict just is, it exists. It's what we do with it that makes it good or bad or even neutral, right? And so we're not saying the fact that you have conflict, that you even have inner conflict, is necessarily bad. But if it is controlling your life, if it is taking over your thoughts, if you're always conflicted, if you're never really thinking about, right, like how do I resolve it and then get to that space of talking about and getting to how you resolve it, then that's when it becomes a real issue, right? It becomes something that you're not controlling, right? And you need some help. You need some techniques with that. And I just want to say that when I was growing up, right, we talk generationally, when I was growing up, there was tremendous inner conflict in my life. Nobody really wanted to hear from kids, number one. So that was number one. And then teenage years were tough because there were so many things that were happening. You're growing, you're maturing. Your parents don't want to talk about certain things, right? And nobody's parents want to talk about certain things, or at least the popular house was the parent that would talk about the controversial, in quotes, controversial stuff for teenagers, right? So I didn't have a lot of advice given or a lot of conversations that really were in depth about what was happening in my life. So it was all up here. I spent a lot of time in my head. I spent a lot of time alone. And so I had a tremendous amount of inner conflict. I also disagreed with a lot of the things that the adults were doing in my life. And no, you ain't going to tell that to anybody and live, right?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
No, then live.
That's what it sounds like.
Anybody know what I'm talking about out there? I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So I didn't have, I should have had people that I could talk to, but they were all dealing with their own conflicts, it seemed like. And my sister and I are only 13 months apart. So we're kind of going through it together, right? She didn't know a whole lot more than I did about life, the world, and the things that we were dealing with. And neither one of us were pleased with the way we were being treated by the majority of adults in our life. And certainly just didn't have somebody who we could go to and sit down and talk with. My grandmothers weren't those people. My grandmother on my dad's side, she was helping to raise, some of her grandchildren. And so it wasn't a lot of time for conversation. So I didn't have a model. I didn't have a track for how to even, first of all, even name it, right? To say, this is inner conflict. It felt like something was wrong with me. It did. It felt like something was wrong with me. And if that's you, please understand and know that we all have inner conflict, but we've got to be able to handle it so that it doesn't take over our lives. And for me, that was very hard to find. So I didn't really start dealing with inner conflict until adulthood. I definitely had depression. And as I said, my therapist was the one that said that depression was anger turned inward, right? I had no idea, and it made perfect sense to me because I was angry about the fact that these things were happening, and I felt conflicted about it, and I had nowhere to really talk that out and test that out. And so therefore I took it on me as that I'm wrong, that I'm bad, that I'm not well, even to that extent, right? That I am not well, and therefore this is all on me. There's nothing else. I grew up with you crying? I'll give you something to cry about. Like, I grew up with that. So if you're crying,
I've never even
help
heard,
me out there.
And again, I never want to knock anyone else's experience. it is
to
just,
you.
yeah, that's
No,
never
seen.
been something that I've ever been exposed to in my household. So anytime I hear it outside, I'm just like, Lord, like I
Yeah.
don't even know how I would. I just know it would be like anyone else. Like it wouldn't probably land well in those
Yeah.
moments, right?
Yeah.
So
And then what do you do
yeah,
with
what
that?
do you do with
Because
that,
if you're
right?
crying, something is upsetting you, right? And
Right.
it's probably inner conflict.
Yeah,
Something is conflicting
absolutely.
within you, and you want and need to get it out. So, again, that sends that message that it's you, right? Because what they're essentially saying is you have no reason to cry, right? I heard that. I heard, oh, you don't have any problems. Wait till you become an adult. Wow, really? Kids don't have problems? Of course they do. But that was, I think I heard that from almost every adult in my life, except maybe my dad. But I'm gonna tell you, the things that culturally and just even as a society that we make the norms can really add to inner conflict being very difficult for us.
That's interesting. I feel like I never heard that stated, but I feel like I might have gotten that vibe by certain like environments or communities that I was in. So definitely like school, right? Like there were just some teachers that very much kind of had that attitude of like what could you be going through? Like I'm here doing this, I'm here doing that, all this for you guys.
You don't have bills to pay.
Right, like I'm doing all this for you guys and da 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 when you could really care less about me and what I'm doing and my future, right? So I think that is very interesting of like even if these things aren't stated all the time, it's clearly the way as a society that we approach conflict, the way that we talk to ourselves, right? The words that we use, right? I've said this before that your brain can't tell the difference with every single thing that you say between what's fact and fiction.
That's right.
So this is where thin lines get created, and then this is when people fall off of those thin lines. And so reality is start with you, so that when you go back out into the world, you just start approaching it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
We can expect, as I said, problems, people to handle things messily, people to whatever, right? But how many times are you really going to hear in a day, well, how did that make you feel? How is that landing for you?
Yeah.
And that's all okay, right?
Right.
We want to make that the norm. Right. And the only way we do that is by starting somewhere. So
yeah,
absolutely.
That's right.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I know you never heard that. I'm so glad you can't sit up here and say, yeah, you used to say that to me. Now you different.
No. No.
Yeah, no, I know, because it just never made sense to me that it was said to us as kids. So I'm not passing around nonsense. I mean, yeah, there are things that I'm sure I've done wrong. I know I've done wrong that were passed down, but when I could catch it, I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that. So we all, like we said, we have internal conflict, and we want you to be thinking about internal conflict, and we want to give you 3 things to consider.
So the first thing, this is just, I think, the money question to start with. Is this something I have control over, right? So I think this is great because you can approach it in 2 different ways, and both are valuable and they're both connected. I think you can approach this from the internal perspective, right? And again, either one or both, even better, right? But internally, you could say, well, is this something I have control over, right? Is this something I'm allowing to kind of eat at my thoughts? Is this something I'm allowing to mess up my sleep? Is this something I'm allowing to affect how I'm showing up at work and my performance? Is this affecting my showing up for my family and my mood and my attitude? All of these things, right? I think those are important questions to pose always, right? And then I think the second way that you could take it is the external, right? Is this something I have control over in the sense of, is there any way that I could possibly change the facts of the situation, right? Is there any way that I could, this is where people kind of get into, is there any way I could make someone do something for me? Is there any way I could, right? And we all know you can't make anyone do anything for you, right? But how this plays out in your external world, in your lens, definitely is another thing to consider, right? Because again, it starts with us, and then everything else that every other area that our brain takes it is in our control, and that does have a role in how things play out externally, right? So we could think, because, oh, this is affecting my sleep and this is affecting my performance. You wake up tired. You say to yourself, I'm exhausted. I can't even get up right now. I don't even want to go to work, right? Causing you to get up later, possibly be late, possibly have stuff to take on, right? And all that stuff. So to alleviate some of that, is this something I have control over? How internally, how externally?
Yeah, and most of the time it is something that we do not have
Most of the
control
time,
over,
yeah.
because we feel like we should be able to control people. And we just can, the only one we can control is ourselves, and the behaviors and the tools that we bring to the conflicts that we are in. So you really do need to check that question and consider that.
Absolutely.
So let's see. Number 2 says, label the effects of this conflict. Goodness, how do we ever do that? Do we really think about, when we're struggling, right, with something internally, how it is affecting us, and consider it in a way where we know, going back to the first one, we can control those effects if we actually engage in trying to resolve this conflict for ourselves and not turning it on others, because the effect that we're having is, this person is making me mad, right? This job is making me depressed, so we're putting it on someone or something else, as opposed to listing, right? I'm depressed. I'm gaining weight. I'm losing weight. I'm losing sleep, as you said. I'm losing friends. I'm not who I used to be. I'm not as happy as I was. I don't do the things that used to bring me joy anymore. Like, all of those things are the effects that you want to take stock of and say, hey, this particular conflict that I continue to struggle with, these are the things that it is doing to me. We're not blaming other people. And I'm not saying that other people don't have a role in the fact that you might be having this in a conflict. But what I'm saying is, when you label, right, the effects that conflict is having, don't put it on other people. Really look at, this is what's happening with me. And is that good or is it bad? Because most of the time it's not good. Right? But I'm going to say, to the flip side of that, there have been inner conflicts where it's allowed me to grow. I've recognized, I needed to be challenged by that particular conflict within me, because it allowed me to shape another lens, to see things in a different way. And that's where you want to get to with inner conflict, because like I said, we're going to have it, but it is the lasting effects of conflict. If they're not good for us, then we really do have to get some techniques, tips, skills for how to handle it.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. And lastly, for things to consider, right, your contribution to what's taking place. Now, I think that this is definitely easier said than done when it comes to the process and talking about the process and what you have to endure to stay in the process.
Right.
However, this is everything. Personally, I think this is everything. The reality is, it takes two to tango in every single encounter in which that involves another party or more parties, right? And so, and even the two could be internally, right? Of you versus your own mind, you versus your own heart, you versus your own soul, and what that really looks like, of what needs to be recycled and what needs to be completely thrown out, right? That's a process. And so I think when we're talking about your contribution, right, it's, how did I show up? Did my attitude possibly start off correct and in the right place, but decline over time? And what caused that? And how did that land for me? That particular thing, what did that trigger in me that made me do such? And I think that, again, this only when you can do it yourself, right, that's everything. And then when you can do it with other people or in front of other people, that only shows them, okay, wait, wow, like I have to look at me too here.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to recognize that here is this person doing this work to try to understand something outside of them, right? Something that took place. And I want to do that too. Now, don't expect that from other people, but I think that that's something that would only motivate others if you get to that point, and when you get to that point, when you can do this with other people and in the presence of other people.
And do you think that folks your age and millennials, do you think that you are doing that more than perhaps my generation or generation right under me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think from millennials on, right, I think that we just are becoming less afraid to bring these things to the table,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of course, we're always going to think about, how much of ourselves we want to share, and for the sake of, okay, I want to keep my job, okay, I want to right, I want to keep this
Right.
relationship intact, right? That is always going to be a natural human response, right,
Right.
to how we show up. But I do think that we are having these conversations, we are posing the questions more, and that in that, this is something that is coming up for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also with that, though, I mean, with more of anything comes more of the opposite, right? Or the potential for the opposite to show up. So I think also that people in my generation specifically, I can't speak to millennials on this
Right.
one, but I think we've even taken it on like the unhealthy side sometimes with almost feeling like, you know, like we know our contribution, we're aware of our contribution, especially to a conflict, especially to inflicting something on someone else, and somehow like justifying it.
Mm.
So it's like going through the process we're
Right.
talking about,
Right.
asking some of these questions, even just ballpark,
Mm-hmm.
and yet somehow, some way, it turns to um, less of an exploration and more of an explanation
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
why we did what we
Right.
did. And I think that's where it can become
Mm-hmm.
a thin line in which people, not only show themselves and where they are, but when they're there.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting
Yeah.
thing there.
Yeah. So I would say, even though we didn't put it as number four would be owning it, right? Your contribution
Yeah,
to
that's always hard.
and that, I don't care what generation that
Yeah,
is.
that's
That's
always
for
hard.
everybody. I know that owning it, because if you can look at your contribution to what's taking place, particularly if what's taking place is things like sleepless nights, things that are, or it's wrecking relationships, those kinds of things, then owning it is going to be an important next step. Even if you think somebody else will never own their part, it's just more freeing.
Absolutely. And so next we want to start getting into some techniques for actually dealing with
Right.
any of these internal conflicts that can and will come up at some point, as we're all going to have to deal with some of our stuff, right? Sweep in front of our own doorstep. So I'll start us off here. First,
Okay.
you want to investigate the roots. Now, however you can get to the root of that problem, conflict,
Right.
that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you got to start from the end of that branch,
Right.
and travel inward,
Mm-hmm.
instead of being able to know right then and there
Right.
that root, and then follow the
Right.
vine as to
Right.
how
Right.
it shows up in the world.
Ooh, I
And
like that.
so, thank you.
That.
So appreciate it. So I think however you can get to the root, if you know it, or you have to start from the end of the vine and go inward. Either way, I think that there's nothing but, honestly, the diamonds in the rough, like when going to the root of what things really are for you. What, not only what happened, right? Things happen, but it's how it landed for you, how it's showing up for you. I think that that's just a forever valuable thing when it comes to being able to really make real progress, real traction, right? And at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve some sort of freedom, some sort of peace, whatever comes closest to that. And I think a lot of that comes from releasing ourselves of a lot of the things that hold us back in our own journeys.
Yeah, because in this work, there's this saying that the conflict that you're in is rarely the conflict that you're in, right? There's the roots to something else and someone else that has brought you to this place, like you said, out on this branch, and you think it's about this particular moment that you're in, but you got to trace it back to figure that out. I had to do that last night with that conflict that I had inside me, and recognize that it was really about something else, or of several things, right? But this is an important piece to do.
Absolutely. It'll only inform how you show up in ongoing conversations and ongoing conflicts when they come up. So
yeah, you know what, let me just say one more thing, and
absolutely.
that is, let me just give an example, because maybe we're too out there for you with this one. So if you have if you're really ruminating on a conflict that you've had because somebody said something to you, right, that you really didn't like, and it felt actually like a put down, right? You have a right to respond to that, but what it's done now is it's created this inner conflict. Are they right? Are they wrong? But what it's really sitting on, though, is that back, maybe it was childhood, maybe it was even just 10 years ago, someone said something similar to you, and maybe you buried that, and now this is bringing it back up, but you think it's actually about you and this person and what they said, but it started that 10 years back or whenever it was back, and that was never resolved. So you gotta look at, is all of this theirs? Is all of this about this present moment? Or is some of this that is, inner conflict for me about what was said back then?
Awesome.
Sit in silence. Oh my goodness. Here's one of my favorite stories around this, right? Because I started, my sons and my niece young in this work, really trying to, they got sick of me every time I would go out and do a workshop or attend a workshop, and I come back home, they'd be hiding. Oh Lord, she gonna have do something with us that was done in the workshop. And I can remember my oldest and my niece, they're only 13 months apart as well. And they were just, kids. They were kids. I think they were like 5 and 4, something like that. And they were just tearing it up in terms of the noise, the house, or whatever. And I said, y'all gonna have to sit down, and you're gonna sit in silence for 5 minutes. And they were like, but we don't know how to sit in silence. Like, we don't know how to be silent. And it's amazing that we actually have to be taught how to sit in silence. And there are some disciplines, yoga, meditation that teach, but we actually have to be taught, because there's so much going on in the world, right? And so many distractions. But sitting in silence can help us be fully present with whatever this inner conflict is. And it can give us some answers if we're really willing to allow the silence to work.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Next, this is one that I added personally. That's the only reason that I took the lead on this one, because I had to speak on this. This is just like everything for me that I'm reminding myself of every single minute of every single day. But using accurate self-talk. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this because I don't think I have to. The reality is we are a makeup of so many layers, right? Like, we are onions, I think is like the best way to put it, right? And so even then, though, those things that we are, or we feel that we are, can change, can fluctuate. We grow, we evolve, right? So we don't identify with the same things we do even like a year ago or 5 years ago, right? And so where self-talk comes into this is, often people will have something happen in their life. They'll think about their contribution, right? Which is the right thing to do, which is one of the right steps to take. And they land on, well, I am this negative connotation. That is a layer of me.
Right.
So I'm terrible, or I'm the problem, or I'm this, and that's just that one seed planted is all it takes to start that process and to keep it alive, right? And so I think this is important because there are times where we have to be real with ourselves of where we are and how we're showing up, and you want to be honest, right? But you are not the mean person you think you are. You might have acted mean in a certain thing, right? A certain conflict. You are not the coward that you're telling yourself you are. You might have just been nervous and afraid and a little less courageous compared to with other things to fully step foot into this new thing, unnerved, right? Or like that. And I think being able to call that for what it is in the most accurate way possible, to which it lands, but it also doesn't kill you in the process, right? You can marinate in it, right? I think that's everything, because we want to be able to come back to these things. We want to be able to come back to these questions and these processes, not feeling like we're steps behind with our own work. So I think that being able to call it for what it is, exactly for what it is and when, is certainly everything. And as I said, sometimes you got to get there and call your behavior for what it is, if that's the behavior you're putting out in the world. But oftentimes we, in our own brains, can turn on us, right? Can be our own worst enemy, and it'll take things further than they really need to go. So being able to draw those lines for yourself so that you can keep coming back, you can keep waking up the next day and want to attack some of this stuff, that's everything.
And I think, thank you for that. And I think that social media plays a huge part, y'all. Because look, I have witnessed people, because social media didn't come around. Like I didn't grow up on social media, but I witnessed young people take 50 to 100 photos of themselves just to post one. And so they're not going to post the worst one, right? They're going to post the best one and their best lives on there. And it just looks like it's so easy for everybody else. So your self-talk is saying, well, what is wrong with you? It's you. You're less than. As you said, you're the coward. You can't even make up your mind. You're confused. How long have you been trying to make this same decision and you still can't make the decision? What's wrong with you? Like, we do so much of that self-talk to ourselves, and it often originates in either something that someone said to us consistently, or us comparing ourselves to other people in our age group. Everybody looks like they are an overnight sensation on social media. Everybody looks like that when they've been working hard, just like you, behind the scenes, and their time has finally come. But the accurate self-talk should be telling yourself things just like, my time is coming. Right? I'm putting in the work. I'm doing what I made this mistake. It's not the end of the world. I'm not a terrible person because I made this mistake. Or how do I correct it? Because everybody makes mistakes. Those are the things that you want to say to yourself. I will get there. I will make it right. I will do the right thing. And because I missed it in this situation, doesn't make me that horrible, stupid, whatever the talk is saying to you. It doesn't make you that. We got to use that accurate self-talk. So thank you for adding this one, because I know there's a lot of people out there, even right now, your self-talk is saying, well, she's talking about everybody else, but not me. I'm this, I'm that, and none of it's good. No. Use accurate self-talk.
Absolutely.
And then you got to trust the process. Oh gosh, trust is such a big word for people. Trusting anything and anyone is really difficult, but it really is. It's a part of life. I truly wish growing up that people had told me how challenging life was really going to be. Fairy tales and all that stuff that I grew up on, and the love songs, and nothing wrong with them, but what they do is create for us this ideal of what life's going to be like just when we get old. All right, wait till I turn 18. Wait till I turn 21. Wait till I turn. All of these things, and rarely does someone sit down and say, "Let me tell you something. Life is going to challenge you, but you gotta hang in there and trust the process. Take the first step, and then take the next step." So when you're talking about inner conflict, trust the process of doing the things that we're saying, right? And you may find some other things, some other tips and techniques helpful to you, but trust the process that you do that first thing, right? Try to trace the roots. And then in trying to trace the roots, sit in silence with that to really reflect and think back. And then when you find it, don't call yourself names for it. Really use that accurate self-talk to tell yourself, I'm going to be able to do this. I am doing this. I am on the right track. I'm a great person. I'm great at this particular thing. I can make this decision. Whatever it is, right? That's a part of the process, but you got to trust it. Don't abandon it, and recognize that you actually do need a process. That this isn't like, don't approach it all willy-nilly. That there's a process to handling inner conflict, and if you trust it and then keep taking those steps, that you'll do better and better at it each time it comes up.
Awesome. Yeah, I think before I toss it back to Dr. Lynn and have her give us, her final thoughts as well as wrap us up, I just want to say that, all of this is so much easier said than done. Especially like the other stuff in episodes, right? But like this stuff, probably like will be top of the list of like the things we'll say that are easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because of that, you will have to give yourself grace at times. You're gonna have to give yourself praise at times, especially when you go to those places that are uncomfortable, that are just discerning, right? And just eat at you a little bit, right? Those roots. Once you start touching some of those roots, we know what that can do for people. And we know that that's also more than enough to snap out of that process and live life in a way in which you don't have to, or you try to set it up in a way in which some of these things don't show up, right? But again, life is life. You will receive curveballs. You will receive just swings and misses. And I think that at the end of the day, you can count on you being there. You can count on you and your heart and your mind and your soul being there and your body. So you want to make sure that those things are as connected as possible. And I'm so glad that, my generation as well as millennials are, especially in the workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really just starting to pose those questions of your role aside, quota aside, you, the person, how are you doing? How is this landing for you? What can we do on that level?
Right.
And I think that that is just a beautiful seed to have planted. And any beast that you feed is only going to survive and thrive, and right. So anything that you do, right, adds up, that you give your time and your attention to. So just see what happens investigating one of those routes, and see what happens like 6 months after that, right? And I'm just very happy that this is something that's not as not just like we're not afraid to go into, but it's not shunned or looked down upon to ask these kinds of questions as much as it might have been one day. So that's a thank you to y'all as a society for helping us get there.
Yeah, and anybody who's watching, thank you to you too. I'm an entertainment girl. I'm a writer. I've always wanted to be in showbiz, and this first step, but there's more to come. And there's a show, the Bear, which I just started watching. Writing, maybe one day I'll write an episode. But I think the piece on the inner conflict is well exhibited in this show. The head character, he often got critiqued terribly, like terrible name calling when he was in the chef school. And when a mistake would happen, when he would make a mistake, that self-talk would come back, and he had to really push through it. I haven't seen yet him flipping it, right, and using the positive, right, self-talk, but just the harm that does, the inner conflicts that we have, the harm that we can allow it to do if we do not take the steps and use the process to change it. It can ruin your dreams. It can, right? It can end the dreams because you start believing that this is always going to be the way you are, that you're never going to be able to resolve this or work your way through it. And that's just not true. We all have inner conflict. It isn't just you, and we can work our way through it. We just have to take just the first step in doing it. So I'm hoping that we shared some things that were helpful to you. I hope you saw yourself in this, and just to know that it's not just you can be powerful in terms of a first step. And let me just tell you, it's not just you. So I'm just glad that you tuned in with us today, because like I told you, I really wanted to talk about this because I think it's just such an important topic. And it seems to be the one that people resonate with when I write about it. So we want you to watch us. Please watch us live. Watch us on TV, right on your actual television, e360tv.com, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV. Like, actually watch us on your television sets, and then comment on any of our, we have our Facebook page for the television show. We want you to like, subscribe, comment, Working It Out TV show, or YouTube. Check us out there. Follow us, subscribe, and just become a part of the Working It Out Across Generations family. We love the comments we've received so far. People have been really vibing with the show and finding some real relief for some of the conflicts that they've been struggling with or are facing. And we're just grateful that you join us either on the replay or live. Thank you for joining us each week.
Absolutely. And remember, conflict is here to teach us something about ourselves. So go out there and find out what that is.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.